If anyone sitting on distant mats would like to bring them closer, feel free to do that. Before we start the talk, there's a balanced chair that I usually sit in the period before the talk, and then a few minutes before each block of sitting. All the other times the chair is available for anyone who would like to sit on it. During the talk, it's removed into the balcony, so bring it in from there if you wish to use it. During the sittings, you can just come to this place and sit on the chair, no need to move it around. This is day 1 of the October 88 7-day retreat. At the very outset of this retreat, in the first talk, let us say things about listening to a talk and about the relationship of the one who is talking with the one who is listening. This is always said at the beginning of a retreat during the first talk. And even though one may have been to many retreats and heard similar words many times over, can the mind remain open in listening freshly? This is the kind of listening we're talking about. Listening not from memory of what one remembers having heard about this topic, but listening freshly now, open to what is being said. In the listening from memory, there's a very narrow track operating in the brain. In listening openly, putting the memory aside of what one has heard about this, the mind is open, wide, not narrowly focused on what it knows and remembers from the past. And in this state of open listening, which is not checking back on what it knows and remembers, something can be seen or heard directly. And then it doesn't matter how many times it may have been said or heard before, it appears new. It is new, because the mind is new. The listening mind is fresh. Not making reference to knowledge and past experience. So is it possible to so listen that even though one is listening to the words that are being said, there is much more that is open and receptive? The sound of the raindrops on the window are also there. The softness of the breeze. Maybe pain in the knees or back. The breathing. Blood circulating. Wind picking up. It's all there. As one is listening to words and whatever else is going on, inside and out. We're also asking whether in listening there can be direct observation of what is going on within oneself. In these talks, we will go into a lot of things, point things out. But it is not enough to just listen to the words and understand them verbally, intellectually. It's of very little use. We have listened to so many words in our life. Maybe understood what was said, verbally or intellectually, have stored it in our knowledge, and yet we live in confusion and sorrow and problems. So what we're wondering here is whether in listening there can be looking at the same time, whether what is said and talked about, what is pointed to, is actually so. Find out for oneself, verify. Which means, doesn't it, that the person who is giving the talk, speaking, does not need to be made into an authority figure. We do want authority figures because it is much easier to believe that somebody else knows, is wise, has the knowledge. Listen to that person, remember what the person said, and not look for oneself. It is arduous to look within, to stop the habitual track of thinking and remembering and comparing and look, and instead look directly. Stop and look and listen for oneself. Openly, without a prejudgment, a pre-conclusion. So is one making Toni into an authority figure? Or is the mind wondering and looking whether what is said is actually so? We like authority figures. We like to have a teacher. Someone told me this. It really feels good to have a teacher. Can that come into awareness as it is? The feeling, the good feeling accompanied with a verbalization it feels good to have a teacher, or have this person as a teacher, just to see that this is going on. And what does it mean? Belief in this person, attachment to this person, taking on blind faith what someone says. That's so dangerous. We do it all the time. And therefore not exercise the mind and body to look. We sometimes refer to attending, questioning, investigating, and looking. We sometimes refer to this as work, for lack of a better word, but it's not completely inappropriate, because there's a certain ardor to this. All of our being and momentum wants to just persevere in what we know and in our habitual thinking channels. Maybe add something to our knowledge, think a little bit in a more expansive way, but not look. One person said, it's not a unique observation, I don't know how to look. I don't think I ever have looked. It's a tremendous discovery. One has always followed, thought, reflected, meditated upon things, but not looked. How do I do that? Is that question actively alive? What does it mean to look? Not know something, not think about something, but to look. Or listen. And maybe in listening right now, is the sound, and in talking with each other, we're labeling it. The sound of the wind in the trees. We often say, listen to the sound of the wind in the leaves and branches, or the sound of an airplane or traffic or a crow. But it is clear, isn't it, that these words, listen to the sound of the wind in the leaves, the rustling of leaves and branches, that these words are not the actuality of what is being described. To be in direct touch with that, can one leave the description aside and just listen barely, not knowing what that is, not referring to the words, the description, the knowledge, but listen freshly, with a mind that is open and receptive, and not bent on knowing, not bent on identifying. It may happen for a moment and then the word is there again. Or maybe a reaction. I can do it or I can't do it. Can one listen to that too? The instant reaction. This is nice or this is hard. Maybe someone else can do it better. I'm very poor at that. To listen to all of those comments coming up on the internal screen, as it were. Not just the comment comes up, I can't do it, or he or she can do it better, but also the feelings that go with these comments on the screen, feelings of frustration or depression or elation. I did it. At that moment of listening and then the comment coming, I did it, this comment is already no longer the open listening, but can the comment itself be heard? I did it, and the good feeling, so that the listening is there and not the absorption in the comment and the reaction to the comment, the feeling down or feeling up, which can become so all-consuming that the wholeness of listening is not there. There's an absorption in the reaction and how one feels. And it goes on and on. I don't feel good. Maybe I should take a rest, or maybe I should do this. Thoughts, feelings, interchanging all the time. Can that be heard, felt, been in touch with as it happens or after it has happened? So that not only all the sounds of the trees and wind and grasses and birds reveal themselves clearly, but also these internal sounds of comment and reaction and emotion that goes with reaction reveals itself not as something to be done away with, to be overcome or gotten rid of, but as something that is happening and is being listened to directly. And in the listening, understood. Yeah, understanding means, yeah, this is happening. First the sound, then the word, then the reaction, then the feeling, all simultaneously, as it were. That's what is happening. All memories of the past can be triggered by word, reaction, and feeling. Because the brain and body is one interconnected network of memory. The whole past responds as we react. It is the past responding in the reaction. And how will one listen to that? Be aware of it, become aware of it. There's no how, it's just being aware of it. At one instant, one doesn't know how it happened, but there is a moment of awareness that there's been reaction and emotion and feeling and reaction to the feeling. It goes on and on. An instant of awareness, which does not need to be close to the sound of the plane, the wind, the bird, because it's all happening this instant. And need not be judged or condemned or accepted. It's just there and seen to be there, and if there is no further comment, it passes. The reaction, the emotion will pass in due time. A deep physical, emotional upset takes a while to subside, and usually it is not allowed to subside naturally, organismically, because of all the reactions to the feeling, which bring new feelings, new sensations and emotions. Can one find that out for oneself as one sits, walks, works, with a sense of wonderment at what all is going on, which is, wonderment doesn't interfere with what's going on. Judgment does. I shouldn't be this way. I should be otherwise. And with that, there's no observation possible, because the mind is on a narrow track of its conditioned judgments, its conditioned shoulds and oughts, and the guilt about not being how one thinks one ought to be. Can one see that when it happens? Can it come into awareness without knowing what to do about it? There's nothing to be done about it. It's only to be seen as happening. So coming back to the question of what is the relationship between the one who's talking and the one who is listening and looking. The one who's talking is not teaching something. We're just looking together at what is happening in the human mind and body and all around us. Looking and listening and attending together. Maybe seeing and hearing directly, maybe not. It can't be taught by anybody to anyone. Things can be pointed out with great energy and intensity. But the directness of awareness cannot be taught. It's unteachable. It doesn't have a cause. It doesn't have a transmission line. It either happens or it doesn't in individual human beings. So the relationship here is one of a common exploration, a common investigation, questioning, looking and listening, in which there need to be no barrier of you and me. That is what thought, that scaffold thought erects and is caught up in it. But when the scaffold of your investigation and my investigation, when that scaffold is seen and therefore doesn't need to continue to operate, then the listening and looking is free from that. What we're looking at has nothing to do with you or me, it has to do with the human mind and body. The human way of interrelating with the past, interrelating with each other through the past. This is how we interrelate unless there's awareness of it. And in the awareness, the past not playing that momentous, all-influential role, being seen for what it is and then relating now out of this instant of present listening and attending. It's of great importance for each one of us to find out for ourselves what is actually going on. What is the truth of this moment? Thought coming up, emotion, reaction. To see that for oneself, to discover it directly. and not to put one's trust into what someone else says and take it over, lock, stock, and barrel. The person who is talking may make mistakes. I can make mistakes. I'm not infallible. May not see something clearly. So we have to all look at all times if we want to see clearly and not depend on what somebody else sees and says he or she sees. If we don't look for ourselves, we will be deceived by ourselves and each other very easily. It happens so quickly. So in listening during a talk, if something is not clear, we don't have a discussion going on during a talk. We have considered at times, because sometimes people say, why don't you have a discussion afterwards? But for many reasons, which I won't go into right now, we have never done it in a retreat. We do it outside of retreat. But if something is not clear or appears to be mistaken, or one wants to go over it again, or one wants to take it further, please, after the talk, make a note of it and bring it to the next meeting. I'll be delighted to do this. And I don't just say that to sound friendly, I mean it. Because the whole essence of the retreat is this inquiring together and clarifying together. And to the extent that questions are brought, we can clarify them and take it to the next talk. Maybe go further with it than we did during the meeting, or put it clearer. So there's input that is coming through questions. If nothing is questioned, nothing is clarified. And we may continue in our muddle of confusion. With which I'm not saying that something can't clarify on its own without having asked a question and discussed it. Or, of course it can happen, but usually it doesn't. So in using questions that are coming up in meetings, I hope no one minds this. This is always treated very anonymously. So it's not revealed who asked what question. But it turns out that questions which one thinks are so personal, one's personal problem or unclarity is so universal. If we scratch at the surface veneer of our selves, of our personalities, and go beyond the surface, beneath the surface, we are so much alike. Because we all have the same brain, the same physique, albeit there being differences, individual differences. No two physiques are completely alike. No two mental, emotional makeups are entirely alike. No two people I've read are ever completely alike. But what we have in common is much more than what differentiates us. Much more fundamental. We've all evolved in the same way, physiologically. The same brain, the same capabilities of the brain to be conditioned, to protect, to make images, to remember, to store, to interconnect, to network with the whole physical body. That's true for all of us, no matter where we live and when we have lived. So, a question which may seem very personal may turn out to be very universal and very applicable, not only for us who are participating in this retreat here, but for other people to listen to and look, who are not participating in this retreat. It's amazing, isn't it? Because usually when we are thinking and lost in thought and problems, we feel so isolated from each other. Thinking about ourselves and our problems has that effect. Talking to ourselves about ourselves, the concern, the worry, the fear, or the ambitions, goals, it all makes for isolation, the feeling of individual isolation. And yet, in truth, we're not isolated in that from each other. We all are like that. The moment the thought begins to churn and trigger the emotions, and emotions trigger more thoughts, there is the encapsulation in that. No matter where one lives, how one has been brought up, in what culture or socioeconomic group. So, can one get a feeling by looking at this, thinking about it, looking at it, finding out about it as we live and talk with each other, interrelate? Can one get a feeling for this interconnectedness of all humankind? What we call our thoughts are thoughts that don't belong to us. They don't belong to anyone. They're there. From the day we were born, there were thoughts inculcated into us, opinions, attitudes, cultural conditioning, social conditioning, racial conditioning, religious conditioning. The whole collective is manifesting in each individual. Yet one may be so proud or so ashamed of one's thoughts and emotions. And yet we're collectively conditioned in that, albeit each individual with slightly different manifestations. When one comes to realize that, have a feeling for it, an insight into that, thought and the resulting emotion loses some of this heavy weight with which it impacts us if one thinks this is mine and I'm responsible for it and I have to do something about it. Change it. Who is the one to change it? That's another thought, that there is an I to change his or her thoughts. That's why we talk so much about it, because if we look at it and see it, run into it directly, then this weight begins to lighten up. And the awareness of seeing non-verbally may take place. An awareness which is not conditioned by the past. Awareness, as we said in the beginning, is not thought, not labeling or thinking or reacting. It's just the awareness of all of that, without taking a stand, without opposing, or accepting. That's the past, our conditioning to oppose, to accept, to condemn, to justify. We've all been conditioned to do that, wherever we are. That's why it's so hard to talk with each other, to interrelate, because we're all so defensive of ourselves. Defensive of what? We're asking it on the very first day. What are we defensive about? When someone criticizes us, or doesn't do things the way we think they ought to be done. What are we defensive about? What are we hurting about? If someone calls us a name, we all are alike in that. It's universal. A universal defense of what? One's ideas about oneself, isn't it? One's images, which the mind, the brain, strings together, as it were, into a life story, a novel, a short story or a long story, or collected volumes of myself. And the attachment to that, and the idea that that's me, my remembrances and ideas and images of myself, that's me, that's my life and body and soul. That's the mistake that thought makes. Thinking that images and remembrances and the sequences of it is real, has more than the reality of sequence of images and remembrances. That reality is a fact. Images coming up, memory images. But to say this is me and to defend it when it is attacked is extra. And yet it's universal. And the cause of universal problems and attack and defense and sorrow, because we hurt each other, not just psychologically but physically, because of our attachment to our images. My people, my country, my race, my religious group. So we're questioning all of that. Questioning meaning becoming aware when this process is in motion in a new way which does not defend or justify, but looks, wonders about it deeply as one finds oneself defending oneself, justifying oneself. Begin to wonder about it. Something is trickling through this seemingly airtight process, but it's not airtight. These are all thoughts, and there are intervals between thoughts. And in these intervals between thoughts, there can be something else. An awareness of what is going on. It is marvelous that this is possible. If it was not possible, we'd all be doomed to continue forever with what we have been continuing forever. Unquestioned, unillumined by something new, which is not just better thought, better philosophy, or better church doctrine. Better political plans, solutions. Now all doesn't help, but the only thing that helps is insight into this whole thing. what is happening, as it is not manifesting out there in the world, in the Middle East, or in the ghettos, or in South Africa, but in oneself. Because the problems of the world are the problems that we deal with from moment to moment. Defensiveness, anger, hurt, retaliation, greed for more, and then the guilt about it all. As we remember a training, you shouldn't be guilty or you shouldn't be selfish. You should be selfless. A training, be selfless, is not insight, is it? It's not insight into selfishness. It's just adding one more thing to our ideas of what we should be doing. And we act out of these ideas, what we should be doing, not out of insight most of the time. And therefore, the confusion never lifts. If our actions come out of our conditioned ideas. This question has been brought up a few times already in the few meetings we've had. And you will agree it is so general, so applicable to all of us. The question, am I indulging myself when I sit? As I'm walking and seeing the birds and smelling the earth and the leaves, appreciating the beauty of the wild flowers, am I doing something for mankind? Shouldn't I be doing something altruistic? I feel guilty if I don't do something for others. Where does this question come from? Where do these feelings arise from? Doesn't it come from our individual and collective training? What we've been told, taught, sometimes under very solemn circumstances, within the enclosures of a church or a temple. With robes and incense, and it seems to weigh more upon one, what one should do, because one feels one is somehow in touch with something sacred because of the building, and the sounds in that building, and the robes that are being worn, and the sense of burning incense, which some of us may have imbibed at the earliest of ages, of what is right and good and what is sinful and bad. Very often in a church setting, the person who pronounces these things sitting somewhat higher or very much higher, talking from up high to down low. All of this has impressed itself upon this body-mind. political leaders usually stand high on a podium addressing the masses below. It's one thing that one is maybe on a podium so that everybody can see, but there's more to it than that. The things hit more, hit deeper. Because the associations are already there in the brain and throughout the body. Something coming from above. Praise or blame. For little children, there's always everything that comes is from above. Parents are taller. Bigger, more remote. When they scold or praise, then it's so amazing, little children, how they take to the little folks of the same size. May not know each other at all, but two babies have intense interest in each other. It doesn't have to be exactly the same size. Kids can be a little bit taller, and little children take to each other. It's different from adults. So we were beginning with a question, where does this guilt feeling comes from? I should be doing something for others. Maybe I'm indulging myself by sitting quietly here and enjoying the sound of the rain and the fragrance of the breeze. Maybe one is indulging oneself. I don't know, one has to look. Or in walking or sitting, the self-center is illumined. The experiencer is seen. And doesn't have to continue because it's just a habitual thought, a thought complex, a thick thought complex. Not just thought complex, but connected, as we've said all along, with emotions and feelings. But that thought, emotion, feeling complex is not necessary for walking through the meadow or into the woods and seeing the green moss on a rotting tree trunk. The fungus there, the beauty of it, the rhythm of it. And the crows calling, maybe a deer walking or running by. And that incredible carpet of colored leaves with the sound and creaking of the branches. It doesn't need that self-complex at all, on the contrary. If that's quiet, then there's the openness of joy of living, not separate from all of that, but as an integral part of it. And in that joy is born a genuine love for each other. And when that love is not there, do what we want, we will not, in our helping each other, do much at all. If it comes out of the sense of guilt and duty, it cannot do much at all. Very little. Maybe nothing at all. Maybe add to the confusion and the lovelessness in this world. Maybe not. One has to look and see for oneself. But when the heart is full with this love of no separation among each other, then whoever we talk to or relate to or work with, that is the world. It's not two isolated individuals. We all hang together. We all affect each other. One person told me the other day that during a very difficult work day, a person has a very difficult job, painful job. which is exhausting to be there with the people that she has to work with their problems, and often such insoluble problems she has to work with, and sometimes not even time for lunch. From 8 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. Exhausting. And then she said she went to the post office, and there was this man there at the counter who had a sweetness about him in giving the stamps and exchanging a few words. She said that, I can't tell you, she said, what difference that made, that sweetness. Was he helping the world? We have such lofty concepts, don't we? We will end here for today.